Hey everyone, it's been a while. Cry about it. So I made it to Platinum with Archfiends, not bad, eh? So what I thought I'd do is just share the deck profile with you. I've done some very slight tweaks since I made it to Platinum, and also what I've tried to do is keep the deck TCG legal, mainly because I wasn't sure how long it would be before the TCG ban list dropped in Master Duel. So obviously cards like Maxi would be banned in that case, but I think we've since found out that it's got its own ban list now, so I could have just played Maxi this whole time, but what are you going to do? Anyway, so for the monsters we have 23 in the set, and some of it looks slightly different to what you're used to. So this is a pure Archfiend build for all intents and purposes. It doesn't run any secondary engines or anything like that. So it's not like the Unchained Archfiend build that we had previously, just pure. And it also uses Summon Skull as well. So if you want to call this an Archfiend Summon Skull deck, you're free to. If you want to call it a Summon Skull deck, then I guess you could. So for all of the Archfiend related cards, we've got 2 Empress and 2 Emperor for the level 8s. We have a secondary boss monster in the form of Berserk Dragon, pretty cool, being able to board wipe, and that's all for the level 8 Archfiends. We have 1 copy of Cursed Necrovir. So that is our level 8 slot that we can always substitute for pretty much anything. But Cursed Necrovir works really well with Empress, and she can pop multiple cards on the field, which tends to be a bit unexpected. Then, just going down the level range, we have 1 copy of Summon Skull. We just pretty much use him to fuse into Manifestation, and then it also becomes an Empress target whilst it's in the graveyard. And also because it's level 6, that allows us to go into Beatrice more often than you would think. And then for the level 3s, we have 2 Archfiend Heiress, and then we have 1 copy of good old Dark Bishop Archfiend, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. So Deathstroke Archfiend is technically a better pick because it's a light, and we get into that a bit later with Chaos Ruler. But we play 1 copy of Dark Bishop simply because I like the map-wide negation that it has for all of your Archfiends. It's mainly there because it's a level 3, and it acts as a nice extender so that we can go into like level 3 Exceeds or like Cherubini or something similar, you know. And that rounds up all of like the Archfiend monsters in the monster lineup. And then for the supporting cards, we have 3 Tour Guide, goes without saying, it's a very good combo starter. We have 3 copies of Fiendish Rhino Warrior, so that's one of the best fiend type supports in the game in my view, being able to send it to the graveyard to mill pretty much anything that you need for any given scenario. And we have 2 Skarm, so Skarm can search Tour Guide, Skarm can search pretty much anything we want. It's like an Heiress, it can search a Dark Spirit, great card. But we play it 2 because at 3 it's just a bit too bricky. And then we have 1 copy each of the Dark Spirit monsters, so 1 Dark Spirit of Banishment, 1 Dark Spirit of Malice. They're pretty much mandatory in all Archfiend builds moving forward in my view. We have 2 copies of Edge Imp Sabers. This is a card which allows you to special summon itself from the graveyard by putting cards on top of your deck, and that can act as a nice extender if, say for example, your Tour Guide gets Ash Blossomed, then you can just have a Void Apocalypse, discard the Edge Imp Sabers, bring it out, and then you can still go into Cherubini for your extra plays, right? And then finally, to wrap up all of the monsters, we have 1 copy of Plague Spreader Zombie. So this is a level 2 tuner that can also revive itself from the graveyard by putting cards on top of the deck. So it's pretty decent. Now for the spells, we play 14 spells. So we have 2 copies of Polymerization. This is mainly for going into your Archfiend's Manifestation, but we do play a couple of other fusion monsters as well. It lets you trigger your monster effects, and also we have access to cards like Starving Venom, 2 dark monsters. It's pretty easy to bring out in this deck. Now we have a Foolish Burial. This deck likes to mill a lot, so having a copy of Foolish allows us to send anything we like. Fantastic stuff. We have 1 copy of Instant Fusion, so this goes into Sea Monster of Theseus, which is a level 5 fusion tuner, and that enables us to pretty much go into a level 8 synchro off the bat. Then we have 3 copies of Fright Fur Patchwork. So this is a card that lets you search for both Polymerization and an Edge Imp Sabers from your deck to your hand. So you're already plussing, which is a win for Archfiends. So 2 things with this. One is of course to go into Archfiend's Manifestation or a related fusion monster, and another one is to bring Edge Imp Sabers to your hand to then send to the graveyard and bring out later for like Cherubini plays or like Master King plays, or if you've got a Plague Spreader, then you can also do some synchro related shenanigans with that. So all in all, it's been really useful to have Fright Fur Patchwork, because just being able to bring that extra monster into your hand is really valuable, I felt. 3 copies of Void Apocalypse. This has been pretty much a staple in all of my builds for Archfiends for as long as I can remember. It's a fantastic card. Discard 1 card, send 1 fiend from your deck to the graveyard, so that can recycle recycle your Dark Spirits, you can search off of Heiress, you can discard Scarms. All in all, it's basically a secondary starter to Tour Guides. If you've got Tour Guide and Void Apocalypse in your hand, you can pretty much get your full combo going, having at least 2 Fiends in the grave and then having Dark Spirits in hand. It's really good. Then we have 1 copy of Called by the Grave. This just lets you stop Ash Blossom or any other problem cards. It's a one-of, so if you draw it, great. If you don't, whoop-de-doo. I know you can play 2 in Master Duel, but like I say, I tried to keep this TCG legal, so then I could also build it in real life and play it like that. And then finally, just to round up the spells, so we have 1 copy of A Deal with Dark Ruler, searchable off of Heiress because it's an Archfiend card, goes into Berserk Dragon, board wipe, not too shabby. And then we have 2 copies of Archfiend's Oath. So prior to reaching Platinum, I actually didn't use this. I used a card called Fusion Recycling Plant, which is also a great card because if you fuse into Archfiend's Manifestation, for example, you can bring Summon Skull back to your hand at the end of the turn, and then you can next turn summon another Manifestation or whatever you might want to bring, right? You can bring an Heiress back to your hand for like extra searches and stuff. So it's a fantastic card. But lately, I found that in its own bizarre way, Archfiend's Oath is actually a really good card for Archfiends. I didn't think I would be saying that in 2022, but we'll go over some of the stuff you can do with it in the combo section a bit later on. And then finally for the trap lineup, so we only play 6 traps, so we've got 1 Call of the Archfiend just for revives. These days I'm actually thinking of taking this out and putting in Archfiend's Roar or maybe a Monster Reborn, because I felt with the combos that I do, bringing Call of the Archfiend to the hand means I have to discard a Dark Spirit to use it, whereas if I have Roar, then I can utilize both the Spirit and Archfiend's Roar, if you know what I mean. So it's going to say it's down to your preference, but I'm slightly leaning towards Roar these days. Then we have 2 copies of Fiend Griefing. It would be good to bump this up to 3, but we're already playing a 43 card deck, so I don't want to increase the deck count by too much. And then we play 3 copies of Skill Drain. But prior to reaching Platinum, I only had 1 copy of Skill Drain. Then that ban list dropped and gave us 3 copies out of absolute nowhere. Crazy, amazing. So this is probably one of the biggest buffs we could have asked for in a long while. So being able to play around Skill Drain is something Archfiends do really effectively because most of their effects happen in hand and in the graveyard. So being able to summon Emperor for free, you know, a 3k beta without tributing, really good. Being able to use Dark Spirits, reviving stuff, and your opponent can't really do anything about it because Skill Drain just basically wins you the whole game. You activate it, it's over. So yeah, we play 3 of that. If you wanted to cut cards down, I would probably remove Berserk Dragon and A Duel with Dark Ruler, because sometimes it just bricks your hand, and that's just the price you kind of have to pay really. But yeah, for sure, if you wanted to make it a bit more consistent, I would take Berserk Dragon out, but keep those skill drains in. So that sums up the whole deck. So it's 43 cards, and now we're going to move on into the extra deck. Okay, so we play Xyz, Links, Fusions, Synchros, all over the place. So we'll start with the Fusion monsters. We have 1 copy of Archfiend's Manifestation. When I was playing Fusion Recycling Plant, I actually played this at 2, because bringing Summon Skull back, you can just summon multiple copies of it, and then you can float for a while, so it's pretty good. But these days, I just run the 1. And then we have 1 copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, so it's a great card to go into in this deck, and being able to effectively nuke the board is nothing to smirk at. And also the attack boost is quite nice as well. You can pretty much get over anything in the game. And then we play 1 copy of Trishula, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. The effect is worthless. We don't do it for its effect. We just have it in the deck because it needs 3 monsters with different names. And it can come in quite handy if you draw Poly and then you have a bunch of monsters you can't really do anything with. So if you've got like an Heiress, a Rhino Warrior, and an Empress just sitting there, you can at least fusion them off, bring out Trishula, and then you can trigger your Heiress and your Rhino Warrior to dump Dark Spirits, search out Archfiend related cards, and then just continue with your plays. That's literally the only reason why we run it. And then to wrap up the fusion lineup, we have 1 sea monster of Theseus. So remember, it's a level 5 tuner, so you can bring this out with instant fusion or ready fusion if you have money to spare, and then just any level 3 that you want, and then you can synchro summon into a level 8. Which moves us on to our synchro lineup. So one of the main synchros that we go into in the early game is Chaos Ruler, the chaotic magical dragon. Summon it, excavate 5 cards from your deck, and then you can add 1 dark or light monster to your hand. All the other cards get milled into the graveyard. So the whole point, of course, is to send some Dark Spirits, go into Chaos Ruler, and then you will mill maybe a Rhino Warrior or like a level 8 Fiend, bring those Dark Spirit monsters straight back into your hand. So it's basically another way to set your graveyard up in case you get ashed, right? If you summon Tour Guide and then that gets interrupted for some reason. So you just play instant fusion, go into Theseus, Synchro, into Chaotic Magical Dragon. However, if you draw Instant Fusion a bit later on in the game, it's still useful because you can use it to go into Theseus and then Synchro off into pretty much any other level 8 Synchro that you want. So just to keep on theme with Archfiends, you could run Thought Ruler Archfiend, which is just a fun card that you get extra life points for. It's not really that good, but lately I've been running Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend. So yes, it's a Red Dragon Archfiend, not a demonic Archfiend, but it's still Archfiend in the name, and it's a level 8 Synchro, so we can bring it out, use its effect to pretty much nuke the board, similar to Starving Venom, inflict some burn damage, and then try to swing for game from there. So it's quite a nice card later on in the game, and Chaos Ruler's good in the early game. It just depends when you draw Instant Fusion, really. And then just the final monster to round up the Synchros is Beels of the Diabolic Dragons. So this is a very classic card. It's been out for ages, and I don't think many people expect it really, but it can't be destroyed by battle, can't be destroyed by card effects, and each time you get damaged, just beefs his attack up forever. So Dragoon, completely useless against Bills. Same with Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, right? It can try and pop it, it's not going to happen, is it? So yeah, Bills is quite a nice like alternate boss monster that you could bring out, and you of course use Plague Spreader to go into it. So it's more of like a mid-late game type monster that you can bring out. You can bring it out turn 1 if you happen to have Plague Spreader in hand, or you've got a Foolish Burial or something, but I much prefer to set my field up first, and then a few turns later you can go into Bills, and that is like an extra threat that your opponent has to deal with. Now for the Exceed lineup, so we play one Dante and then we play one Beatrice. So basically we only play Dante to go into Beatrice if we have a Scarm in hand. You can almost basically set up your entire combo with just a Beatrice. It's really useful for the deck. And then finally we just play the Draglubion package. So Draglubion, Numeron Dragon, and Hope Harbinger Dragon. So the whole point, go into Draglubion, then special summon Numeron Dragon, swing for 9k damage. It's a really easy way to end the game. If you can't afford Numeron Dragon, like me in real life, because £30 for 3 cards is nuts, then you can play other cards like Dingersu. You can play the Cypher package, so Cypher Dragon, Fulama Photon Dragon, and Cypher Blade Dragon. That pops basically 3 cards on the field. It's really good. But obviously Numeron Dragon just has that bit of extra power just in case you need to go into it, and it's actually fairly easy to go into. If you have a Archfiend Emperor on your side of the field and another level 8 Fiend, then you can try and pop something. If they negate it with like Infinite Impermanence, now you've suddenly got 2 level 8s that you can just overlay into and swing for game. So that can be a very cheesy win, and it actually happens quite often. So I encourage you to run this package if you can. And now the last 3 monsters in the deck are just 3 link monsters. So one is Master King Archfiend, which is surprisingly good for an Archfiend card. When it first came out, everyone thought it was terrible. I also thought it was pretty bad. But it's basically there to give you additional copies of Heiress. So you trigger its effect, you chain block it with Master King, so it can't be ashed or anything. And then chances are it will get shuffled back into the deck, and then you get your search, and then you've also got another copy for next turn, you know. Or if it goes to your hand or gets special summoned, happy days. Like literally any of the dice results for Heiress is beneficial. It's great for linking off monsters to recycle your Dark Spirits as well. And if you want to keep a level 8 in your deck, you can always mill and then use Master King to like bring it back again as well. And then finally we play a Cherubini, so probably one of the more important starter cards in the deck. And then we play one Underworld Goddess of a Closed World, just because there are problem cards that exist in the game, and it's so nice just to be able to just tribute over it. And then you've got a monster that's unaffected by most things, can negate special summons from the graveyard, and a respectable 3k attack. And it's a Fiend, so if you've got Archfiend Emperor, you're not restricted at all. You can still link off into Underworld Goddess, and happy days. You could play sort of like a Link 3 or a Link 4. The only problem is your extra deck space is really tight, but I can imagine you playing Nightmare Unicorn, or like a Topologic Zeroboros, for example. That's a pretty decent Link 4. Unchained Abomination is also pretty good because it's a Fiend, but there's just, for my preference, there's just no room to add them, so I've just gone with this. Right, so that sums up the whole deck. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth did you get to Platinum with Archfiends and there's effectively 0 hand traps in there, like what the hell's going on? So I'll go over some of the combo lines that you can go into and pretty much give you a feel for how the deck is played. So for the first combo, with this sort of hand, you can end on both Dark Spirits in hand, an Empress in the graveyard, a manifestation on the field. So you can start off with good old Frightfur Patchwork. Obviously this is uninterrupted, so Frightfur Patchwork bring both Edgent Sabers and a Polymerization to a hand. So at this point we could activate Poly and bring out something like Trishula by sending all three of these to the graveyard, but instead what we're going to do is activate Void Apocalypse to send Edgent Sabers to the graveyard, and then from here we're going to send a Dark Spirit of Banishment. Now we can use good old Edge Imp Sabers effect. That's going to put Archfiend Empress on top of our deck. Then we are going to use Archfiend's Oath. Now this card, pay 500 life points, declare a card name, and if the card is on top of your deck, you add it to your hand. If not, you send it to the graveyard. We're just going to intentionally say the wrong card so that we can get Empress out of our deck and into the graveyard. And that will put Dark Spirit of Banishment back into our hand. So Empress is one of those cards that if you brick with it turn 1, you're going to have a bad time. But luckily Oath is one of those cards that kind of let us unbrick it from our hands, which is quite nice. And we haven't normal summoned yet, so we're going to bring out Fiendish Rhino Warrior. And then we're going to go into good old Cherubini, and then Rhino Warrior's effect is going to activate. Now from here, well, there's a few things, right? We can send Heiress to the graveyard to bring a Summoned Skull to our hand. Yeah, we could have sent a level 8 Fiends like Curse Necrophere, and then we could have used Cherubini's effect to send Skarm to the graveyard, which we're going to do anyway. But now, it really depends on what sort of board state you want to end on. So now we could activate Polymerization, and then we could summon Manifestation by using Summon Skull and the Dark Spirit, and that would bring out a Manifestation that can't be destroyed by card effects. Or we can get rid of Cherubini from the field, bring out Manifestation, keep our Dark Spirit, and then at the end of the turn we can use Skarm to bring Malice into our hand. So now we have Manifestation, which can float into Summon Skull, and then we also have Archfiend Empress, which will float back into Manifestation. So the concept of Archfiends that you need to understand if you're new to the archetype is that it's not an archetype focused on bringing out as many interruptions as possible, right? It's not that kind of meta deck. What the deck excels quite well at, though, is its ability to basically grind and float through interruptions. Archfiend's Manifestation here is the only monster on our side of the field, so that, what I like to say, is like a true monster count of 1. But with Archfiends, what you should consider is the potential monster count that you have on your side of the field. So we can basically count it, right? So we've got 1 that your opponent sees. However, so that's the 1, we're going to float into Summon Skull, so that's 2. We can use Dark Spirit of Malice to go into Empress, that's 3. When Empress dies, it will bring out a Manifestation, that's 4. Then, if they attack, we can use Dark Spirit of Banishment to bring out Empress, that's 5. And then if Empress dies again, we can bring out Summon Skull, so that's 6. So we actually have a potential monster count of 6 monsters, even though we only have 1 monster on our side of the field. So that's the whole gimmick of Archfiends in a nutshell, is to just basically float forever, frustrate your opponent, and then on your turn, bring your resources back, use Void Apocalypse, send a Curse Necrophere, recycle your Dark Spirits, and float forever all over again. So with this hand, we could use Frightfur Patchwork. So this is a combo section, but it's also a bit of a test hand, so kind of shuffling and seeing what we've got. So now we've got Edge Imp Sabers and Poly. So once again, we could activate Polymerization to bring out the likes of Trishula, send these 3 to the graveyard, bring out Trishula, then we can activate Archfiend Heiress's effect to bring whatever we like into our hand. We could bring Dark Bishop Archfiend because it's level 3. We haven't normal summoned yet, so we could always use Edge Imp Sabers, plop it back on top of the deck, bring this out, use Archfiend's Oath, and then we're going to just type Dark Bishop Archfiend. There it is. So we know exactly what's going on top of our deck, so here it comes back again. We can summon it and go into Cherubini if we like. We've already got a level 8 Fiend in the grave, so we can just send a Skarm. But we do also have a tour guide from the Underworld, so we could have a Dark Spirit on the field, and then we can always Cherubini that away, and then use Fiendish Rhino Warrior to send, say, an Archfiend Empress into the graveyard, and then that's going to bring Dark Spirit of Banishment back into our hand. So we could have done it that way. We've also got Dark Bishop that we could have extended plays with and kept Tour Guide for next turn. So with this hand, once again we've opened up with Frightfur Patchwork, so that's not too bad. Bring both of those to the hand. And now we've got a couple of options available to us. So we could activate Instant Fusion, and that's going to bring out Sea Monster of Theseus. And then we can summon, let's say, Edge Imp Sabers. And then from here, we're going to synchro both of those into Chaos Ruler. And now we get to mill 5 cards from our deck. We can add any that we like into the hand. So, for example, Summon Skull could be pretty decent. Everything else gets milled, and then Fiendish Rhino Warrior's effect activates. So, because we've got some level 8 fiends in the graveyard, what we could do is put a Scarm into the grave, or we could send an ARS and then search for something. But yeah, I'm going to put a Scarm into the graveyard, and then I'm going to activate Polymerization to bring out Archfiend's Manifestation. So we're going to get rid of Plague Spreader Zombie and Summon Skull. Put this guy onto the field. Now we've got a couple of options available, so we're going to use Plague Spreader Zombies effect, and I'm just going to put Rhino Warrior on top of the deck. I'm going to bring out Plague Spreader Zombie, and now we can keep this manifestation if we want, or we can synchro it off into good old Bills of the Diabolic Dragons. So now we've got 2 level 8s if we ever wanted to swing for game, if it was turn 2, but we've now got a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and we just so happen to have a Scarm to search for a Dark Spirit Banishment. We have a monster that can float into Curse Necrophere, which can revive itself at the end of the turn. We've got a Fiend Griefing here, so we should have set that, and we could have sent an Archfiend Empress, for example, and that would have allowed us to float even further. So if we think about the true versus potential monster count that we've got here, so we've got a true count of 2, however, with Dark Spirit of Banishment, so that could bring out Archfiend Empress, for example, and then so that's already 2. Archfiend Empress is 3, and then if Empress dies, that can go into a Curse Necrophere, which is 4, and then if Curse Necrophere dies at the end of the turn, she will revive herself, so that's a potential monster count of 5. Right, so with this hand, again we've opened up with Frightfare Patchwork. I should probably show a couple of combos that don't use it. So we're going to activate that. We're going to activate Tour Guide. Now, if Tour Guide gets ashed, so this doesn't work, then it's not too bad, because we can activate Polymerization anyway, and then use Trishula. So if we send Empress, a Edge Imp Sabers, and a Archfiend Empress into the graveyard, we can bring out Trishula, and then ARS's effect will then activate. So we could bring Archfiend's Oath, for example, and then we can activate Edge Imp Sabers effect, put Edge Imp back, special summon, then we can always activate Archfiend's Oath, use the effect, call it right, we get to draw it, and that's great. And then we can go into Cherubini from there, and then just put a Scarm into the graveyard. So at the end of the turn, we've managed to pretty much unbrick this Empress, and then we also get to put Dark Spirit of Banishment into our hand, which is not too shabby. Because our Tour Guide got ashed, that means our board is quite simplified. We don't have anything to float into, so we've got a true monster count of 2, but a potential monster count of like 3, which isn't great. However, if Tour Guide didn't get ashed, then we can obviously add these off of Frightfare Patchwork. We can summon Tour Guide from the Underworld, activate his effect. Straight away, we're just going to go ahead and bring out a Dark Spirit of Banishment, and then we're going to use both of those to go into Cherubini. And then Cherubini's effect, we can send a Dark Spirit of Banishment. And then Fiendish Rhino Warrior's effect is going to send a level 8 Fiend into the graveyard. Banishment's going to go back into our hands, happy days. Now we can use Polymerization to go into Trishula. So we can send our Empress, we can send our ARS, just like we did last time, and our Edge Imp Sabers. So now we've done all of that, we can again bring whatever we like. Archfiend's Oath again is a fairly decent one. Call of the Archfiend is also pretty good. So that's probably what I would go for. So I would set this, then at the end of the turn we can have a look at what we've got. So we have a true monster count of 2, but then we've also got Archfiend Empress off of Dark Spirit of Banishment, and then if Empress dies we can go into Curse Necrophere, and then if that dies we also have access to Call of the Archfiends to bring Archfiend Empress back again, so that's 5, and then if she dies Curse Necrophere comes back again, and that's 6. If Curse Necrophere happens to die again, she'll still come back at the end of the turn, so that's a potential monster count of like 7 monsters. And if Call of the Archfiend is still present on the field, then she'll pop something. So from 2 to 7 monsters is not too bad, eh? So with this hand, so we've got a Instant Fusion, which is not too bad, because then we can use Edge Imp Sabers for some tasty effects. So we can activate Instant Fusion, and this is going to bring out Sea Monster of Theseus. So this is basically our one-stop shop for asynchro play. So we can summon Edge Imp Sabers. And then from here, we can go into the Chaos Ruler, activate his effect, get the top 5 cards from our deck, and then we may as well add a tour guide from the Underworld into the hand. Everything else is going to get sent, and then we have Fiendish Rhino Warrior's effect, which just by chance really. So basically we should look to see if we have any level 8 fiends. We don't, but we do have an Empress in hand, so we've got a couple of options. We could send Dark Spirit of Malice, and then we can activate Void Apocalypse to send the Empress into the graveyard, and then from there we can send another level 8 fiend into the grave, and then that will activate both Malice's effect and it will activate Dark Spirit of Banishment's effect. But a bit later on in the game, you may have a bunch of monsters in your graveyard, such as Plague Spreader and Edge Imp Sabers. So in the event that that happens, what you can do, I'll just set up that graveyard. So I've discarded Plague Spreader, I've discarded Edge Imp Sabers. So now what you can do is activate Edge Imp Sabers, for example, put, in this case, Cursed Necrophere back on the deck, and if you've got an Archfiend's Oath, then let's just intentionally call the wrong card, and then if you have your Dark Spirits in the graveyard, which if it's late game, you most likely will do, you can then add both of those back into your hand, so being able to effectively plus off of that is not too bad. Then we'll activate Plague Spreader's effect, so let's just put our Skarm back on top of our deck, summon that, and we also have a level 3 here. So the Dark Spirits would serve just fine, I just happen to have Dark Bishop in hand, so that allows you to go into a level 8 synchro. So it could be Bills. If it's later on in the game, you might want to summon Scarlight instead, so use its effect to effectively nuke the field. So that's a small combo which is fairly decent, and in a pinch it can be really useful, particularly with Oath, so you can put stuff back into your hand. So that allows you to get around the Edge Imp Plague Spreader sort of like top decking situation you've got going on there. And also it lets you end on a level 8 synchro, so it's pretty powerful. Another sort of funny combo that you can do, which isn't really a combo, let's say you've got Void Apocalypse, or you've got any sort of like Archfiend card in your graveyard, and they've got a field of like 5 monsters or something. It's pretty crazy. So let's see, what can you do? You can activate Archfiend Empress's effect. I'm just going to bring whatever, doesn't really matter. And then I've got an Archfiend Emperor in my hand, so, or you could have searched it. Use its effect, I will banish that heiress, and then I'll just pop himself. If you have the Dark Spirits in your grave, then that will add both of those back to your hand, which is pretty good. But now because you've popped itself, you can just activate a Deal with Dark Ruler, summon Berserk Dragon, and then just attack every monster they have. If they activate something in response, then you can always chain Dark Spirit of Malice to bring your monster back onto the field. So one thing to keep in mind, Berserk Dragon is extremely easy to summon in this deck, particularly because you can pop Emperor by himself, or you can just link him off into Master King Archfiend, bring your Dark Spirits back into your hand, activate a Deal with Dark Ruler, and then just special summon Berserk Dragon and board wipe. So yeah, it's pretty good. So there are more combos and lines of play that you could figure out. There's quite a few options available to you. It's not a hugely combo oriented deck, but the sort of plays that you can do are kind of relative to the game state that you're in. So I encourage you to just have a play around with the deck and have a think about the moment-to-moment gameplay and who you're up against and what you can possibly do. So that about wraps it up. Like I say, I got this Archfiend deck to Platinum, which is pretty decent as far as Archfiends go. Like one of the very first archetypes in the game, being able to reach Platinum is not too shabby. I'm always kind of fascinated by the number of new discoveries that I make with the deck. It keeps changing. Every time I think the deck is done, and I buy the cards to create the deck in real life, I think of something else almost instantly, and it's very frustrating. But it is what it is. It's quite cool to come up with all these new combos and finding uses for old cards like Archfiend's Oath. Never thought I'd do that. So if you enjoyed this video, my name's Adam. If you didn't, my name's Steve. And if you want to see more Archfiend related duels, reviews, combos and discussions, then feel free to have a browse and hit subscribe and the notification bell so that you get notified when content like this is uploaded in the future. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you around.